Folks, Christy would now like to do Q&A, so I'm sure you've got lots to say. She'll answer whatever you can.
Yes. I don't know Shelley's poetry very well, but I was really struck by how relevant it is, particularly that poem from the Queen Mab.
Definitely.
Oh, it made me shiver actually how relevant it is.
Yeah, I don't know if people at the back can hear. The lady's just saying that how relevant Shelley's poetry is even today, especially what you said about Queen Mab. Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
And just to plug, we have got some copies of Shelley's complete work on the stall back here, so if you're written, please come and buy.
I think some of the poetry is impossible to read today. He was so intelligent and so classically educated. The references are very difficult. I tried before I came today.
Again, I'll just say so people at the back can hear. This lady was saying that the poetry that Shelley wrote is almost impossible to read today.
Yes,
some of it is very. Would you describe it as arcane and there's a lot of like classical references and because of the education. I think that the problem is really that people probably perceive Shelley as being, a poet from ages ago and very well educated and all the rest of it. And I think that nowadays, if you're educated in the state system, you have to do a certain amount of self-education as well. You can't just expect to be spoon-fed things, and I think that is the main point really, that in order to understand Shelley's poetry and in order to understand any poetry really, you've got to be a bit of an autodidact. You've got to take on a bit of it yourself.
And you compare it with Byron. It's much easier to read Byron.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, Byron is a bit easier to read. I think probably because
he's better.
Quite a lot of Byron's work is written in more conversational style, shall we say, whereas Shelley's, a lot of it's more complicated and some of it more theoretical. But I wouldn't say all of it is at all. I would say that there's a lot of it you can easily get into it, and I think you just have to apply your mind to it really.
I think what this lady's saying, bringing it back to the topic, is very, very punk, if you don't mind me saying, because she's got no preconceptions and she's just absorbed the artwork and she's made her own decision, which I think is what we're really trying to say. Question everything, but for God's sake come up with your own answers. That's what the punks are trying to say, and that's why Christy's sort of contrasting them. So you're a punk.
Comments or yes?
I would just like to say that I love your talks. I was at the one at Hucknall, which you did really well in the
you
Facebook.
got out alive.
Incredible! yeah. I just love the parallels that you draw. The sort of rock star one you did then, and this punk one now. It's brilliant, and I don't know. I wish I had you to teach me about poetry.
The talk this lady's describing is the one that we did at Hucknall a few weeks ago. It was actually the one that I did last year, which was Byron the First Rock Star. It was at the Red Lion in Hucknall, which is a very, shall we say, typical sort of town pub, very popular with locals. And while we were there was a DJ playing disco music. Then we had some Morris dancers. Then we had, I think it was ABBA playing really loud. Then me and Greg did the talk, and after that there was a 21st birthday party going on.
And
then the landlady was putting the stocks, and there was sponges. In fact, at one point I was really frightened that the audience were going to pick up the sponges and start throwing them at It was good fun. Sorry.
Yes, I've got a question. Assuming that Shelley is a punk in his mind and that his orientation is like a punk, why is it that he doesn't seem to use any innovative verse forms at all? Because I noticed when you were reading extracts from the poetry, it was very, not only classically minded in the way that it's put together, but the meter and the rhyme schemes, the structure and everything, it's all extremely traditional and is virtually indistinguishable from someone like Alexander Pope.
Yes,
so what is punk about that?
Right, I think it's a very good question.
repeat the question? Can you just
Yeah.
repeat the
Quick
question?
recap.
The lady was just saying that the way that Shelley writes is very classical, traditional metre and rhyme, and the form of the poetry. He didn't sort of break any boundaries with his style. I think the reason that he's a punk is because of his subject matter, and also the way that he wrote about things that were actually happening at the time, and his attitude to life, and his personal philosophy and his political philosophy. I think that is the punk side of him, as much as the actual subject matter of his poetry. I think that the style, you're dead right. But then I would say that with punk bands, with punk music, the style that they used was very traditional rock and roll. It was just like 4/4 beats, simple chord structures, simple melodies, but it was what they were saying that was different, and what they looked like that was different, and the way they lived their lives that was different. That was the way they broke the boundaries, and I think that's true of Shelley as well.
Isn't there something also in that using the traditional forms, you're subverting them because you're filling them? People might just listen and hear dum rhyme, blah blah blah, but actually when they really listen, they're not getting what they think they're getting, and that's quite wacky.
Absolutely. I mean, I mentioned John Cooper Clarke and also Benjamin Zephaniah, and if you read any of their poetry, which I strongly urge you to do because they're both absolutely brilliant, if you've got access to the internet, most people have. Both of them are on there. They're both on YouTube. They've also got their own websites, but they use again very traditional forms of poetry. Some of it is totally different, but where they do use the traditional forms, verse and metre and rhyme and so on, the things that they talk about, the subjects that they discuss, and the way that they present it, and the vocabulary that they use is different and punk, and it's traditional.
Can I also just say again, like this lady over here, that's a very punk thing to say.
It is, definitely.
The title of the talk is he a punk or what?
Yeah.
So really, it's up to you to make your mind up. And to what degree? It's question it, come up with your own answers. And I would just like to say that I'm a case in point with this, because when punk came along in '76, I'd already made my musical direction. I mean, I'm proudly wearing my Emerson, Lake and Palmer badge there. I love ELP and I don't care who knows it. But I'd already got into that kind of stuff at the time. And then this radically new stuff came along where everyone looked different and sounded different. And I thought, yeah, I want a bit of that as well. That's another part, that's two sides of the same coin, And I think that's the other thing about punk, is that you decide what you want to be. You decide what you want to listen to. If you prefer Byron, then great. If you don't like, fine. But it's what you choose to get out of it, and it's all there for our enjoyment. And I think I'm really glad I grew up. One thing I might have influenced it is that I grew up in a small town, not a big city. I think if I'd lived somewhere like Nottingham or London at the time, I think maybe the battle lines had been drawn, and the width of the trousers and the hairdo might have, I don't know, that might have made someone stronger, I don't know. I would recommend, Christy's recommending poetry. If none of you have seen it, have a look at the film Whatever Happened to Harold Smith, for a really good Midlands Northern perspective on punk and what it meant to someone living in a real situation. I think it's as good, if not better, than some of the well-documented London stuff. But again, the whole point is go with it, get what you can out of it, and you decide. If you don't think he was a punk, then he wasn't. But he had good things about him. Punk in context, wasn't it? Yeah.
Do you not think that John Clare, because he came from a popular background, in many ways expresses the sort of spirit that Shelley had in mind but couldn't really express because of his education, his upper class?
Possibly, yes. Sorry, the lady at the front row was just saying that maybe John Clare, who's a poet, I have to admit I don't really know that much about him. I do know that he had mental health issues, as we would say nowadays, and he wrote more simple. Yeah,
his mentality is a lot more punk than Shelley.
Because it was from a poorer background.
Yeah, and it was completely against where he was born and brought up. So it's very strange.
And he couldn't really find society. That's why he ended up.
But this is great, isn't it? Because we've just, from that discourse here, we've all heard about something new. That's very punk. We'll go and look that
To
up.
have that perspective, I think, coming from a, like you say, a more working class background, John Clare perhaps was more able to express that attitude in the same way that we were saying about you know, the punks coming from working class backgrounds. It didn't matter whether you were from, you know, Cambridge or wherever, or whether you were from a tower block. What mattered was your attitude to life and, you know, the way that you behaved, and that you didn't just take in what people told you, that you questioned it, and you didn't just you know, kowtow to authority just because you've been told to. Yes, Ron.
It's ironic that when you want to find the classical education holding sway, you've got to go to the kind of background that Shelley would have loathed, the public school. And at public school, we used to, you had chapel 3 times a day, and was it 4 on Sunday? I can't remember. But what you did get out of it was you were imbued with the kind of lyricism of the Bible itself. I didn't get much of the classical education, the Latin and that sort of thing, because the headmaster didn't teach at the time that I was there. But it's now a very, very strong force that the school still exists, and it has those traditions of classical education,
yeah, I mean,
the Bible bashing.
Yes, definitely. I mean, it still is an absolute bedrock of British society. Ron was just saying that you know, he went to public school, and you had chapel 3 times a day, possibly 4 times on a Sunday, and that you ended up being imbued with, you know, the verse of the Bible, and, you know, the liturgies and so on.
And Latin and Greek.
And Latin and Greek. Everyone was saying that you weren't taught Latin.
Well, it somehow escaped. I think what happens.
You see, I come from a comprehensive school, and I was taught Latin, so I feel, you know, very privileged. I think it's still, it's still a big divide. There's still a massive class divide in this country. Don't let anybody tell you that there isn't, because the blooming is. I mean, how many millionaires are there in the cabinet?
And public school.
Several. Yeah, they're all public school boys.
Yes,
They're all public school boys. It's still old school tie. It's still, you know, old cronies. You know, it's still exactly the same. So that's why I said I don't think Shelley would have thought it was any different.
But wasn't the other party guest in the past, you've had a lot of trade union meetings and so on. We have had people in government. I mean, just we're back in a
there are still people in government now. There are still MPs. There are individual MPs who are, you know, not compliant, shall we say, with the prevailing orthodoxy. You know, there are people who do stand up for things that they believe in. I mean, only recently there was an MP spoke out against the because Cameron's wanting to repeal the Hunting Act, you know, so that all his crones can still go hunting. And this MP, who is actually a Tory MP, is against hunting. And he said, I refuse to be, you know, whipped into shape and told that I can't say what I need to say.
That's democracy,
you know,
isn't it?
Exactly. That's why I said it's fine democracy. Yeah, exactly.
I think also the point is, it's not necessarily where you come from, it's what you do with it.
Yes.
It's like, do you know what I mean? But also I think some of these things can it's good to have things shaken up. And I think that's the context of the punk thing, is to shake things up. I went to a grammar school, and when I got there I remember I thought the headmaster must be a conservative, coming from a fairly left-wing background myself. I was told in very polite terms, no, he's a liberal, so deal with it, and you know, don't prejudge people, don't assume, and just, you know, knock you down to size, sonny. It's not what you thought. I learned, you see, before I'd even got to the classroom. So, but you have to be listening. You have to be listening, and then whatever you learn, you build on. Interesting what you said, because I don't come from a poetic background, but I've just been chosen to do the readings. So,
we never know.
Can't think why. I should have said that like Johnny Roach. I can't think why. But, it's an education for me, and I absolutely hear what you say. I don't know any of the classical references, but I want to learn. I want to be enriched by it, like I want to be enriched by the Sex Pistols and the Damned and ELP and whoever else I like, or whatever. Tracy Emin or whoever, name your thing, go out and find one yourselves. That's what the punks did. Break out of the mould, but keep your roots.
We'd better get into French poetry at the end of the last
Ooh la la.
That will give you some surprises. People like that.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap up now, so thank you very much everybody for coming along.